How many of you remember the Twilight Zone? It was a TV show from back in the 1960s, or I've seen reruns since then. Rod Serling could conjure up some great stories in his mind, and on the bizarre, the weird, the spooky. But right here in McCook, Nebraska, we have a Twilight Zone story. And I had about 30 years ago a woman. I went to visit a friend and he wasn't there, but his mother was. So she invited me in. So I went in, and of course she had a very heavy German accent. And so I asked her if she had been over there in the war, and she said yes. And it just seemed like she was more than willing to tell her story and wanted to tell it. And she said that her family lived in Berlin when World War II started. Her father and her brother were then drafted into the German army, and they were both killed. She told that they were hiding in a basement of a 3-story building when the United States was bombing them, air raid bombing them, and a 500-pound bomb crashed through clear into the basement where they were, and it was about 50 feet away from them when it finally settled down and stopped, and the bomb didn't go off. That's how close she came to perhaps being vaporized. By the end of the war, she and her mother were all that was left of the family, and they were in an apartment as the Russian soldiers came through Berlin. She told that the Russians busted into their apartment and laid her and her mother side by side, and she estimated in the next 20 plus hours that 50 men raped each of them. And her mother kept telling her, don't fight them or they'll kill us both. And so she allowed the rape to continue. With that sick and perverted evilness of war happening to them. After that, she said no matter what it took, she was getting out of Germany. She then went, made sure they got on the Allied side when they split up Berlin into 2 parts, Russian and Allied. And even though it was against the law for American soldiers to fraternize, so-called, be with German girls, she quickly found an American soldier that wanted to be with her. And whatever she had to do, she did, and he finally married her and shipped her back to the United States, and then he came when he got out of the service. And they lived on a farm for the rest of their lives here in southwest Nebraska. And keeping that in mind, I asked her, I said, you know, boy, you got to hate Russians. And she said no. And I was shocked by that statement after 50 men had used her when she was 16 years old. And she said, no, I hate Germany. Germany caused that war. Germany abused the Russians and killed and slaughtered and raped them. She said they were just getting even. And she hated Germany, not Russia. And I thought that was an interesting twist. Fast forward 30 years, and we went to a local birthday party of a man that was 75 years old. And one of his classmates came from Denver, and that he went to school with here in this area. And so that man from Denver that had come for his birthday party, he and his wife sat beside me. And I got to visiting with her, and she had a heavy German accent. I said, were you over there during the war? And she said, yes. And why, I have no idea, but she was more than willing, just as the first woman, to tell her story. And she and her family lived in Berlin. And her father and her brother were both drafted and were killed in the war. And the only thing that was different is she and her mother, and she was 16 years old at the time, but the only thing different was she had a 12-year-old sister. Well, when the Russians came through at the end of the war, they broke into their apartment, and they took all 3 of the females and they raped them. And she said at least 50 men had her and her mother. But she said neither one of them had near as many as their sister, because it seemed like the Russians wanted that 12-year-old German girl. And said it must have been 150 had her. And her sister was never the same after that. And then again, as the first woman I spoke with. The second woman said, I was going to do anything I could to get out of Germany. I want to get out. And so she also made sure their family was on the Allied side when they split up German Berlin. And she also found a man, any man she'd have went with, she said, but she did find a man that would marry her, and she got married, and they went back to the States. Came in this area for a while, and then they moved to Denver. There she started a business that became a mega business, and she retired multi-millionaire lady. But anyway, that was her story. And to imagine that I had two women tell me almost identical stories from Berlin in Nazi Germany. And she said the same thing as the first woman. When I said, do you hate the Russians for what they did to you? She said the same exact thing. She said, I don't hate the Russians for raping me. She said, Germany started the war. Germany did a lot of bad things to them. They were just getting even. The bad thing, they got even with me, and by using me and my little sister and my mother. And I thought, dear God, what a crazy world, and what a Twilight Zone, area that I have had the privilege of living in, and also for people just simply to tell me their stories. This is McCook's Mr. Bill. I hope you enjoyed this Twilight story, and subscribe to my future films. Look at some of my past ones. Thank you.